Good afternoon, youth. Come to another wonderful session. Today is the 10th of April, 2022, and I'm going to share the word today. Now, the word that I was inspired to share today is actually inspired by Elisha's word from his message last week. I usually am inspired by his word. I'm not copying you, Elisha, I promise. When he hears this. But in his last message, I'm not sure if you guys remember, but in a sermon many moons ago, many months ago, he said the lesson title was, "Who are you?" And he asked us, as Christians, who are we? As people, who are we? As the children of God, who are we? And I was thinking, I was like, who am I? It really made me question that. And then his message last week seemed to match perfectly. It was like a perfect follow-up of what he said. He didn't really ask us, who are we again? But his message was the turnaround life, or it's going to be turned around, or, a roundabout, turnabout, miraculous change in life and circumstances. So I was thinking, I was connecting the dots, and I was like, okay. So first he asked me, who am I? Then he said that in my life, it can be turned around. So who I am is maybe not who God actually has a higher purpose for me to be. So it inspired my message today. And the final nail in the head that he really hammered in was his memory verse, Romans 8 verse 28, which said, all things work together for good for those who love the Lord, those who are called according to his purpose. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. And that's how we got the message title today, Chosen and Called. Just to begin, that's a picture of John the Baptist with a random person who's not Jesus, because I don't remember Jesus having short hair. But for the sake of this picture, it's chosen and called. John was chosen and called to be the Baptist that was going to baptize Jesus. And then that was the anointing on Jesus's life to begin his great ministry. That's just an image. But I'm going to start by telling you, what does chosen mean and what does called mean? Because you might think, actually, aren't they so similar? The truth is they are. So the meaning of chosen is having been selected as the best or most appropriate for a particular job. And called is to consider someone or something to be selected for a particular purpose. Now, I think that's cool because chosen and called, you might think, aren't they the same thing? They're similar in that you've been selected for a particular purpose. But once you are chosen, it's like you're chosen at birth to do something. And then called is when you hear the call of God on your life. You get to understand his purpose for you. So we're going to go through it today. I'm going to give you 3 points, as I always do. And of course, plenty of Bible examples to show you people who were chosen and called. They responded to being chosen and they responded to being called. So let's see what great stories I've chosen today. And there's lots of pictures, so you have plenty to look at. So my first point is you are chosen and called for a specific time. So my number one thing that I wanted to tell you guys is about perfection. Every point of mine I'm going to make today is about how God has done it perfectly. He's not just selected you on average. He's not just selected you for, oh, if it happens, it happens. No, and he's not selected you by coincidence. With God, there are no coincidences, just plans, just facts. So number one, you have been perfectly chosen for the perfect time. I love that. That means God knew you. He knew you from the moment you were born. He knew when you took your first steps, your first word. He knew you when you started doing your first job. For many of you who don't work here today, or you're in school still, he knew you on your first day of school. He planned it perfectly. He timed it perfectly. Every birthday he was there, and he was watching you grow up. And it was amazing to God. It still is amazing to God to see you and how you're becoming the person that you were always meant to be. And with God, he has perfect timing. So when you trust him to handle the timing of your life, it all works so perfectly. And sometimes it works seamlessly, like there's no breaks. One thing after the other is a blessing after blessing or a miracle after miracle. And that's because his timing is special. His timing is so divine. And notice how I can see in my own life, when I trust my own timing, my own judgment of when I think something is good or something should happen at this time because I think so for whatever reason, it usually doesn't work out, or it doesn't work out as amazingly as I thought it was going to. It doesn't have that same effect or result. But guess what? When God has control over the timing of your life, it is perfect. And you almost like reflect back and you think, that was truly incredible. So an example I can give from my own life first is, and again, it feels like I'm copying Elisha from last week when he gave examples of his own life. But he spoke about how he and his family came to the UK. And I would say the same thing. When my family and I came to the UK, I was thinking, I was 17 when I came. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, no, I'm practically 18. I'm almost an adult. This is like too late. It was too late in my life to have to adjust to a new culture, the British culture. But I look, it's been a while now, and I think no, actually, that was the perfect time because I moved from Dubai to UK right after O levels, and I went right into A levels or sixth form, as you might say. It was perfect timing. If you had asked me to choose it, oh, Andy, when do you want to move to the UK? I would have picked something else. I would have picked sometime in my 20s. If I could go back in time and switch it to when I was 5 years old, I would probably do that too. But with God, he handles the timing of our life when we let him. And when we let him, it's perfection. And the Bible verse that supports this is my favorite story of all time about Queen Esther. So her people were in trouble, and she just happened to be queen at that time. Coincidence? I think not. So in Esther 4 verse 14, Mordecai, her cousin, he represents all the Jews in the story, the ones who are about to be persecuted. And he says, yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Who knows if you are chosen to be queen for this perfect timing to save your people? Because she was Jewish, and they were Jewish, they were foreigners in the Persian Empire. They were not even meant to be there, but she was perfect. And they were perfect, and they served a perfect God. So the timing worked out perfectly, as you can imagine. My next example is Noah. When he was chosen to build an ark, people were like, this is the most ridiculous thing we have ever seen. Not just because, one, he was building an ark when they were not even surrounded by water, but he was also building an ark because he was like, oh, God is going to, he was warning the people and saying, actually, God is going to do a thing. Oh my gosh, guys, repent because, and in fact, join us because save yourselves. The people were like, this guy is crazy. No. And they thought his building the ark, the commission God had given him, was insane. But actually, in the Bible, as soon as that ark was built, the rain started falling. Coincidence? I think not. I'm gonna start saying that a lot. And so he built that ark. So he was safe in that ark with his family and with two of every animal, insect, bird, reptile, everyone in the world. And they were going to enter a new earth that was cleansed and perfect. And God saved them, not because he was like, yeah, I'll just, one family, why not? We might as well spare all the human race. No, he was like, Noah and his family, anointed, protected to serve that purpose, that perfect time, and he saved them. And my next example is probably my favorite in the display of perfect timing with God. Look at John the Baptist. He was born to prepare people for the Messiah. And then Jesus, in turn, the Messiah, was born to give his life to save the whole world. They were cousins, which is the fun part of my story. But look at John's birth. Elizabeth, who gave birth to him, she was Mary's cousin. So they're cousins, and then these are cousins. We love the cousin story. But look at Elizabeth and her husband, Zechariah. If you read their story, They were old, you guys. They were old. Like they were like Abraham and Sarah, but like slightly younger. But it was impossible for them to have children. But by the grace of God, they had this child, their one son named John. And his purpose was to be the Baptist. So his cousin Jesus could then come be baptized by him. Look at the time that Elizabeth gave birth to John, and look at the time that Mary gave birth to Jesus. It was perfect timing because they were going to come and serve a perfect purpose for God together. And that's why with God, when we give him the timing, it will always work out perfectly. And it brings me to my second point. You are chosen and called for a particular purpose. And again, you have been perfectly chosen for the perfect purpose. And I want to begin this point by saying one, that I have completely stolen Alicia's Bible verse from last week because it inspired the message today. So that's Romans 8, verse 28. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. We think, I especially used to think, and I still sometimes fight, I struggle with the thought that my plans for my life, what I think my purpose in this life is somehow the one purpose that's meant for me. No, we have such a higher calling, you guys, such a mightier purpose that God has on each and every one of our lives. And we see it through these Bible characters over here today. You'll understand what I mean. Moses, look at him. We know him. He led Israel from Egypt. He was leading them to this promised land. And look at him. He's got like some thunder behind him. Look at him with the Red Sea, just like nobody's business. But did you know he had a speech impediment? Did you know that he used to stutter? He used to get nervous with public speaking. It's almost like God was literally like a tough parent, and he was like, I do not care if you have speech problems. I'm sending you to say those words, let my people go to Pharaoh. And guess what? God did not bring him to embarrassment and to shame. They even went on to perform 10 miracles that blew the Egyptian people's minds, and sometimes a lot of their household items, because it was bad. You can read about the 10 plagues. Same way, look at Gideon. If you guys have never heard of Gideon, it was a few generations after Moses, so it was still the Israelites. But this time, they had come from Egypt. They were in that like struggle time. They can see Canaan, and they pretty much reached Canaan, the promised land. But they had a lot of people, a lot of armies and troubled kingdoms to fight before they could claim Canaan. And of all people to lead them at this one particular time, God was like, Gideon, I choose you. Do you know what Gideon responded? If you or I had to be asked to describe yourself in one word, I'd probably say something like, oh my gosh, I'm so artistic. Or maybe someone else would be like, oh my gosh, I'm so smart. Do you know what Gideon responded? He literally said to God, he was like, God, I'm so weak. He's like, the word for me is weak. Not only was he weak, apparently he was the weakest son from the weakest tribe of the weakest family in all of Israel. He just made a big weak excuse. And God was like, yeah, I'm not having it. God took this person who looked like he had no purpose in this life except to be quiet and stay in his corner. And God took this man to lead 300 Israelites to defeat an army of like huge, huge people. They're the image with the fire and the trumpets. It's a cool story. You can read it in the book of Judges. My next examples are in the New Testament. Look at Peter. We all know Peter walked on water, doubted, denied God, the perfect disciple, honestly. But look at him when he was Simon. He was born with this one purpose of being a fisherman. And Jesus was like, no, actually, it's either me or the fish. And Peter, thankfully, was like, yeah, okay, I'm going to stop being Simon with the fish, and I'm going to become Peter, the disciple who's going to fish men. Same way with Matthew. He was another disciple, and he was born with the life purpose of being a tax collector. Jesus found him, and again, instead of the fish this time, Jesus was like, it's me or the money. And not gonna lie, Matthew definitely thought a bit about the money. I would too, definitely. But he finally made the correct choice, finally. And he went with Jesus to be his disciple. So look at Peter and Matthew. They were literally born to lead different careers. And they were quite like, they were not old men, but they were well enough into age that they were like, this is my life now. I'm a tax collector. I'm a fisherman. I guess this is what the rest of my life is going to be. But when Jesus comes into your life, he turns it around. Like Alicia said, the turnaround life, God has that power. If you just surrender, he's going to lead you to your perfect purpose, the one that you were born to lead all this time. And my final example is Stephen or Stephen, whichever one you guys like to pronounce it as. Stephen, he was one of the later disciples. This is post Jesus's crucifixion on the cross and his resurrection. So Stephen was out there and he was preaching, but he was stoned to death pretty much. And guess who was an eyewitness to his stoning to death? It was Saul. Saul, who was going to become Paul. Watch how Saul witnessed this disciple of Jesus Christ proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ, and he watched him being stoned to death. He did nothing. He did nothing to stop the people doing that. But then watch how this same Saul, who saw the persecution, went to become Paul, who was changing lives and was sharing the same gospel that this guy got martyred for. It's a strange connection and it's a strange timing, but guess what? With God, it's perfect timing. And with God, there are no coincidences, just plans. So look at our purpose. Sometimes our purpose, maybe, even me right now, if I'm sharing this word, you guys might take it differently, but maybe someone who'll watch it on YouTube later will be like, oh my gosh, I really needed to hear that actually. The purpose, the timing, I'm chosen and I'm called. So the things we do when we live our purpose according to what God says is our purpose, is going to work great miracles. And I also want to tell you guys, no one can be who you were meant to be. No one can do what you were meant to do. That's how special and unique you are to God, that he was like, no, I need an Andrea, I need an Auntie Delaney, I need everyone else. I'm not going to say everyone's names, but without you, the world would not be the same. Your family would not be the same. The people around you would not be the same. You were meant to be, and you were meant to be here at the perfect timing. I'm 22 now because that was God's perfect timing that I be 22 now and do this. Does that make sense? Hopefully it will when I take you to my third point. You are chosen and called to be different. Being different, I think we grew up thinking that being different is bad. Being different is exciting, but it's not safe. It'll actually lead you to a lot of gray areas. But one thing you learn with your walk with God is that you've been perfectly chosen to be different in a really perfect way. Like you're different. You're so different. In my family, I come from a long line of women who never actually went ahead to higher education, to university. Not that that's a bad thing. It was just the way the world worked in those generations. But I'm different now. Maybe my ancestors would look at me and be like, a girl going to university? How strange. But it is what it is. I'm different now, even if someone was way different back then. But your difference is so special, especially because you have been differentiated. You have been distinctly separated unto God, because God is going to make a difference in your life and through your life. That difference is so special. You are so chosen and you are so called in your difference that, again, no one else could be you, and no one else could do it the way that you do, and no one else could act in the timing that you act. And I love it because you can see it in all the Bible examples. For example, with Enoch, he walked with God, so he never faced death. Everyone faced death in those times. People still face death today. But look at this guy who was different because he chose to have a relationship with God when everyone else was ignoring a relationship with God. Enoch walked with God. He talked with God. He and God were like pals. They were friends. And because of that, he never faced death. God carried him into heaven when the perfect time came. Again, perfect timing. Then look at Prophet Elijah. He was so faithful in God's power. This guy was like bringing down fire from heaven. He was causing famines across the land in a good way. You will read the story and see. He was so faithful, and he so believed in the miraculous power of God that finally, when it was time for him to go to heaven, he said goodbye to his companion Elisha, and he was carried to heaven on a chariot of fire. Don't be asking God for chariots of fire, guys. I have tried it. I don't know if it's going to work, but he was different. He was so different. When you believe in that difference, that God is different, your God is different from all other gods because he's the greatest and he's the most faithful. And that miracle, the miracle working ability of your God is going to cause differences and for you to be different in the best way. Look at Samson. He was so different. He was so extraordinarily strong. He was a strong. He was like a freak of nature. And there was a thing, he couldn't cut his hair or he would lose his strength. Now, if that applied to all human beings, it would not be weird, right? But it doesn't. No one cuts their hair and suddenly loses their strength. And no one is that strong. So Samson, he was special. He was anointed. He was literally separated to be different. And because of his strength, he was made for that time to save his people from the persecution by the Philistines. He was made for that. Look at him with his pillars, breaking them apart and all of that. He was different. Same way that King Solomon was different. He was so wise. Like he was a brain before brains were a thing. And some of King Solomon's architectural methods are still used to this day because people were like, oh my gosh, that was pretty impressive. And this guy was so wise that the Queen of Sheba comes from like Ethiopia of today's geography, if we do a little research into it. So imagine where Ethiopia was and imagine where Solomon was in Israel. How on earth did she hear about him? He had to be that great. And it was not just her, it was plenty of other people. To this day, people say, as wise as Solomon. It's amazing. God anointed him to be that wise, to make him different like that, to show God's glory through that wisdom that he has made this guy different for. And finally, it's my most precious example because I love this example. Is of Mary. We call her Mother Mary, or the mother of Jesus. She was so faithful. She was like such a young girl as well when God sent the angel Gabriel to tell her, you're going to give birth to the Son of God. She did not waver for a second. She did not stutter at all. She wasn't like, okay, God, that's a really funny joke. Okay, you want me to give birth to the Son of God? Okay, that's interesting. She never said that. She didn't doubt. She was just so accepting. She was like, if that is the calling on my life, God, if that is my life purpose, so be it. And because she was separated to be different, to be special, to be unique, the birth of Jesus, the way he was born to this Virgin Mary, is still such a controversial topic to this day. But why? It's because God works differently. God is different. God shows a difference in the lives of people who allow him to show that difference in their lives. She was so faithful despite the shame that she would have faced in her society. They would have really persecuted her for giving birth before marriage. But was she going to care? Not really. She knew she was chosen to be different, and she knew the God she served was perfect and would never bring her to embarrassment. And so sometimes I think we have to be like Mary. We have to be like Moses. We have to be like Gideon and Enoch and Elijah and Esther and Simon and Matthew are a little bit questionable, but everyone else are really inspiring characters. They responded to the call on their life. They responded to being chosen by God. And they said, we accept that. And we're going to give you glory in this world because that is our purpose. And they also trusted that God had perfect timing for them. And finally, they trusted that the reason they were born was to be different, and to be different for good reasons, not just randomly. I think that about my own life. I think that about each and every one of the youth who are here today, if you're listening, or anyone who will listen in future. You are so called and you are so anointed. And in fact, I missed a Bible verse over there, but my memory verse that I'm going to give is 1 Peter 2, verse 9 to 10. But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own special people. You once were not a people, but now you're the people of God. That's kind of saying you went from being nobodies, you went from being random people on this earth, and then you were selected and anointed and chosen and called for such a beautiful, beautiful promise, to live with Jesus, to live for God, and to live for a greater purpose that is greater than ourselves and our lives here on earth. So I hope you've been somewhat inspired by the message today. I know I am. And I think the verses match. So Romans 8, verse 28, you're the called according to his purpose. So all things are working together for your good because you love the Lord. And 1 Peter 2, verse 9 to 10, you're a chosen generation. You are chosen to be holy, to be blameless, and to serve a perfect, loving God. So thank you for listening to my word today. I hope you'll take some remnant of the message and maybe tell it to your friends, tell it to your family. Maybe someone needs to hear it today that, in fact, their life is going to work out perfectly when they give their lives to Jesus. So God bless you, and I hope you like the lesson.